ThesisGate is nearing its end. The Freedom of Information Act case brought forth by 3 righteous individuals in the UK's tribunal court has stalled because the ICO refused to submit a final representation plea. The case in the UK tribunal court isn't about a degree, it's about Tsai's external examiners and their relevance to public interest. That's why the ICO had no choice but to stall the people who invoked the Freedom of Information Act. Now that it has submitted its final representation plea, it's clear that the ICO is at its wit's end. The University of London originally hired the second largest law firm in the UK, Pinsent Masons, to act as its legal counsel. However, according to sources abroad, after Tsai Ing-wen and her people messed up Pinsent Masons' defense strategy by having a legal representative from LSE prematurely reveal 2 examiners' names, Pinsent Masons declined to continue defending the University of London. And so, Tsai's scheme continues to unravel. Wheels aren't just turning in the UK. Cases in Taiwan are making steady progress. Professor He Defen's 2-year-long administrative case against the Education Ministry had its final hearing on August 26th. Throughout the case, presiding judge Xu Lihua seemed to have already made up her mind and simply rushed through court procedures. The Education Ministry's lawyer made the following 2 closing points. 1. The Education Ministry denied unlawfully classifying files and has already provided copies of Tsai Ing-wen's resume and diploma. He's complaint should be dismissed. 2. He's request for 10 million new Taiwan dollars in damages from Education Minister Pan Wen-zong is unlawful and should be dismissed. Professor He was not happy with this outcome. If Tsai's files weren't classified, then why did she spend a year petitioning the administrative courts? After her petition failed, she pressed on with a full-fledged case in the administrative court. Why would she waste all of that effort if not to find out the true nature of the classified documents? Would a random citizen like her spend such astronomical resources fighting against the establishment for nothing? Will the Education Ministry be let off the hook so easily? Professor He Defen thinks that if the Education Ministry did not classify Tsai's files, then it should publicize what it has. She also thinks the person responsible for classifying Tsai's files until 2049 should be revealed and subject to punishment.
按照我们的公文文书处理，我们经过行政的判断之后，我们去做适当的隐匿，把它相关可能涉及到个人各自的
同意可以公开的。
我们是经过我们内部的行政的程序。
最后签字是谁？
我们是经过内部行政程序啦，不好意思，
都不敢讲。
Professor He once requested that NCCU President Guo Mingzhen be called upon as a witness. However, presiding judge Xu did not summon Guo. When He expressed her reservations, Xu dismissively told He to share her concerns and that the judges will decide whether or not they will send a summons. Upon hearing the judge's reaction, lawyer Jim Chang declared that he represented ThesisGate investigators. He said that under normal procedure, files of interest should have been sent to both the Education Ministry and NCCU. But because there were glaring discrepancies in files both sides have shown, Zhang thought it was necessary to question NCCU to see if their files matched up with the Education Ministry's. The presiding judge couldn't have cared less and said that a ruling will be issued on September 16th. There was no intention to summon Guo. The truth is, Professor He applied to have Guo called upon as a witness long ago. However, the judge didn't even bother addressing her application or offer an explanation for their decision. The judge's inaction reveals the administrative court's indifferent attitude. It's not interested in the truth, it only wants to deal with the terms of the case as is. The administrative court is avoiding the summoning of witnesses to avoid inadvertently advancing ThesisGate. Professor He's dissection of Tsai's classified files have altered ThesisGate's course. Anytime her case was called to order in court, legal administrators seemed to vigorously try to turn her court complaint into a matter of simple document retrieval. Their argument boiled down to, if you can navigate the retrieval process, then you can access the files. But they never really said if the files she asked for were there. The thing is, Professor He isn't just after files. She also wants to know who, why, when, how, under what circumstances were Tsai's files classified until 2049. She's not only looking for files, she's also looking for an offender. On April 1st, the Education Ministry said Tsai Ing-wen agreed to publicize her personal files, and that so long as people are willing to apply for the files, they can get them. They wanted to skirt the issue of the files' classification entirely, which, we should point out, was done against several laws. Here's what's interesting. On March 31st, Public Prosecutor Huang Wei indicted Dr. Dennis Pang. Included in the indictment file were copies of Tsai's career files. It seems that the Education Ministry and the Taipei District Prosecutor's Office simultaneously decided to declassify the files. This means that the offending organization may have evaluated that the truth behind who classified the files is much worse than the files themselves. They'll do whatever they can to draw attention away from the classification process.
最后签字是谁？
我是经过内部行政程序啦，不好意思，
都不敢讲。
It's not that hard to predict how the administrative court's ruling on September 16th will go. It won't try to reveal who classified the documents because there's only one person who has the power to do that: her. We're not expecting much from the ruling, and it will probably only reveal more harsh truths about Taiwan. However, it seems that Professor He's determination has inspired some at the Education Ministry to reveal the truth. On June 2nd, the Education Ministry provided Professor He with copies of Tsai Ing-wen's employment files at NCCU. Interestingly, on September 28, 1984, Tsai Ing-wen apparently wrote that her thesis was titled Law of Subsidies, Dumping, and Market Safeguards in one of the forms. This is the 6th iteration of Tsai's thesis title we have seen. Is the Education Ministry getting ready to jump ship? This file is a detrimental piece of evidence that authorities would have gone to great lengths to prevent ThesisGate investigators from seeing. It is devastating to Tsai Ing-wen's credibility. Why would the Education Ministry provide Professor He with this file on June 2nd?
那教育部他在上2次准备庭，他就一直转移焦点，说他们没有封查资料，所以我需要什么资料呢？只要我提出来，他们就给我。那其实上是不可能的，因为我不知道他那里有些什么资料，所以我在整个这1-2年一次抽丝剥茧的，我现在其实我知道有很关键的资料呢，就是他要封锁的一个最大的一个致命伤。所以他还是有些资料是不公布的，所以他要去封锁。可是我认为他这个封锁是完全违法，完全是说不过去的，欲盖弥彰的。比如说他的这个封锁是要有30年，对于凡是要保密30年的公文是只有涉及最高国家机密，只有总统可以下令。所以他为了要保护他自己，他不惜用最激烈的手段。 去用国家机密来保密这个。我一直抗议的就是说，你这是非常违法而且非常危险的行为，因为真的碰到国家机密的时候，人家对他已经不相信了。所以他已经所有的东西都是一个人的独裁做决定。那我们的这个教育部居然不分青红皂白，有在他的这个指令之下，完全像奴才一般的就去替他做这种事。那我们的国家的公务员就是完全没有行政中立，完全不站在人民的立场为人民服务，就为一个人服务。这就是台湾整个民主沦落的一个很明白的一个现象。为了隐藏一个人的犯罪，这个犯罪呢，大家说是37年前的事，请大家注意，这个犯罪在继续中，它的损害在扩大中。我要的是你违法的封存，你就要认为你是违法，要给予惩戒，要公开道歉，向人民道歉，然后把这个封存的这个所有的资料解密。那我今天提出来的一个我相信是非常震撼，所有的刑法什么都不用再打了。1984年9月，他正式报给教育部，由政大报给教育部的履历表上，他的博士论文不是这一本书，这个大家觉得多严重
？If we look carefully, we see that Professor He Defun was provided with the original version of the Education Ministry file. The Education Ministry's lawyer and the Department of Higher Education, on the other hand, received reproductions. This indicates that someone at the Education Ministry is purposefully boxing out their own people, almost as if they're acting against the offending organization. Why? Here's another interesting bit about this particular employment file. Prosecutor Huang Wei did not include it as part of his indictment. Huang Wei's indictment letters cited several of Tsai's career files, including other similar employment records. Strictly speaking, the employment file the Education Ministry provided He with should have been part of those initial records Huang gave out. However, he omitted them. Did Huang purposefully leave this file out, or did someone else prevent him from including it? On the other hand, the Education Ministry didn't give He any other employment records on June 2nd, just this one. It's as if they knew He already had all of the other files and was just missing that particular one. Is someone trying to lend us a hand? We've said before, ThesisGate is like pulling teeth. We can conclude that all of Tsai Ing-wen's career files Huang Wei has published thus far had to be filtered by someone higher up. The offending organization only admits things when we back them into a corner. We forced the Education Ministry to admit they weren't the ones that classified Tsai's files in administrative court. We even got Tsai Ing-wen's people to admit she was teaching at Soochow University in 1983. Now that we're confronting them about the finer details of Tsai's period of study, they have to do serious damage control. However, the career file that Professor He got is a big break in the ThesisGate investigation. The file is a form Tsai Ing-wen filled out half a year after she supposedly graduated. There's no way she would write the wrong thesis title then. From this information, we can tell that unfair trade practices and safeguard actions does not exist. Not only that, but any endorsement of that thesis is bogus. So this begs the question, why did the Education Ministry provide Professor He with this document on June 2nd, 2021? Is there a faceless whistleblower at the Education Ministry who can't stand being part of Tsai's ruse anymore? Or did the Education Ministry shoot itself in the foot in its haste? Tsai's online supporters couldn't respond to what the new file revealed. Online forums called on the president to offer an explanation. After 2 days of silence, Presidential Office spokesperson Xavier Chang made the following statements on a Sunday evening. LSE has already said that Tsai Ing-wen obtained a PhD from the school in 1984. Prosecutors have already indicted one person in connection to spreading falsehoods about the president's degree. The presidential office has already provided several files and documents that prove the president passed rigorous academic procedure to get her degree. Her thesis has been submitted to the National Central Library and is available to anyone who wishes to read and examine it. If you take a look at Tsai Ing-wen's thesis, you can see it is divided into the three following parts. Part 1, A World in Transition. Part 2, Law of Subsidies, Dumping, and Market Safeguards, and Part 3, Law, Politics, and Efficiency. The title Law of Subsidies, Dumping, and Market Safeguards refers to Part 2 of President Tsai's thesis, Unfair Trade Practices and Safeguard Actions. It takes up 237 out of the thesis's 365 pages, a majority of the work. When Tsai Ing-wen applied for work at NCCU, she submitted that portion of her thesis for review. We'd like to once again reiterate that LSE is and should be the only authority that can endorse Tsai Ing-wen's degree. We hope that people can look to the school's stance on Tsai's thesis as the one reliable source. People should not give in to disinformation, nor should they disseminate it. The presidential office repeats LSE's official statement on Tsai Ing-wen's degree, relying on it like it does on the 278 pages of files an LSE legal representative came out with. People probably can't accept the explanation that a single part of a thesis was used to represent the work as a whole. The presidential office also emphasized that prosecutors have indicted someone and that Part 2 took up a majority of the thesis in their argument. However, a discrepancy as big as this can't be explained away as regional differences with academic expectation or procedure. One doesn't need a PhD to know that the presidential office is lying. These explanations are an insult to the people's intelligence. Calls for Tsai to step down come from both at home and abroad. Did Tsai Ing-wen, who was teaching at Soochow University in 1983, make a quick trip back to London for a Sunday Viva on October 16th that year? That's another important key to this mystery. In Tsai's defamation case against Dr. Dennis Pang, lawyer Jim Chang requested that the judge place a hold on sensitive information. Chang even told the court what information he'd like held and how he would like it processed in order to avoid any hiccups. Chang's request is written as follows. A hold is requested for Tsai Ing-wen's entry and exit records at the country's border between November 11, 1982 and March 31, 1984. A second hold is requested for Tsai Ing-ling's, Tsai Ing-wen's sister, entry and exit records at the country's border between November 11, 1982 and October 1983. Please acquire this information through the court's Digital Information Network database. The courts denied Chang's request less than a week later on July 20th. The court believes it is unlikely that the evidence in question is under reasonable threat of tampering or manipulation. There are mechanisms in place to identify people who attempt to change records, and there are also methods to restore lost information. The country operates under a democratic doctrine, and the court believes that all public servants are capable of maintaining neutrality. It is doubtful that likely candidates would obey orders from superiors and risk breaking the law to tamper with the evidence in question. Furthermore, entry and exit records can be obtained from the courts and prosecutor offices. This information is known to the claimant as evidenced in his application. The claimant's concern that Tsai Ing-wen will obstruct acquisition of this information is deemed excessive. The judge has complete faith in civil servants' neutrality and thinks they won't alter entry records. It's unclear if the judge is overconfident or if they just don't understand how low the offending party is willing to go. Here's the strange thing. A clerk responded to Chang saying that the court already requested his desired files via the government's internal file network. Delivery would take 2 weeks. However, Jim Chang already told the court that the files are available digitally and can be obtained in 10 minutes. The judge also used this reasoning to deny Chang his hold request. If both sides knew about this quicker method, why was it necessary to use the government's internal network to get this information? Why wait 2 weeks? Upon hearing what the clerk told him, Jim Chang sent out another letter on August 4th. He asked the courts why they didn't just get the necessary information from the court's digital database. He asked the courts if it was trying to warn border authorities that such a request for sensitive information was coming. Why did the judge refuse to obtain Tsai's entry and exit information from the court's digital database? Did the judge already see it and realize they were looking at information that could blow ThesisGate wide open? Is that why the court asked the border authorities for the documents to throw the ball to them? Once again, we see how ThesisGate has corroded Taiwan's once proud judicial mechanisms. Two weeks later, Jim Chang tried once again to get a hold of Tsai's entry and exit records, but he was denied by the court clerk. The clerk said the records in question were incomplete and that Chang would have to wait until the rest of the files arrived before he could see them. Chang asked why the record was incomplete. The clerk told Chang that the border authority said it had not finished compiling its digital files yet. Currently, only records after 1988 are available. The clerk said they already sent a second request to the border authority asking them for the missing records. How strange. Tsai Ing-wen's penchant for the improbable strikes again. But is it true that the border authority hasn't finished compiling its files? Well, one helpful viewer once provided EPM with a copy of their own exit and entry record, a record that goes all the way back to 1983. The file in question detailed their activities at Taiwan's borders meticulously between 1983 and 2020. For some reason, their file was not cut off at 1988 like the border authority claimed should happen. The only possibility here is that Tsai Ing-wen sealed away her own entry and exit records prior to 1988, just like how she sealed away her career files until 2049. The border authority, like the education ministry, is playing along. Can the judge still claim that public servants are trustworthy? The judge on the case has no reason to dismiss Chang's request. Even more ridiculous is what happened after the court requested Tsai's complete travel record a second time. The border authority simply sent a letter in response with one line of text that said, Tsai Ing-wen and Tsai Ing-ling left Taiwan on October 15, 1983, and returned together on October 30, 1983. No official records, just one line in a letter. Can you believe it? The offending organization knows no bounds. Tsai Ing-wen was already teaching at Soochow University in 1983. It goes against logic and common sense to believe that she took some time off during this time to finish her PhD. Tsai Ing-wen and her people have fabricated this ridiculous story about how she got her degree, but the story lacks plausibility. How can someone treat their all-important viva as just a trip to be dealt with like some run-of-the-mill vacation? Going by the border authorities' letter, Tsai Ing-wen would have had to go straight to her viva right after she got off the plane. This story is ludicrous. The offending party obviously underestimates the people's intelligence. They tried to sell part 2 of Tsai's thesis, the majority, as the thesis itself. It's a lie that would fail to fool a kindergartner. Then there's the matter of the Tsai sisters flying to London on October 15, 1983. Let's see how the border authority explains this one. After that, we'll take a closer look at this unlikely viva trip. The floodgates of this scandal are bound to open this year. Tsai's power isn't forever. For the sake of Taiwan's democracy, all of the unfit civil servants and judicial workers will be exposed. Let this be a fair warning to those who conspire. We will not give up.